In order to use Azure Rights Management Services with your Exchange environment in Office 365, first you have to go and activate it. And there's another video to actually show you how to turn the service itself on for your entire tenant. Now that it's on for your tenant, you'll need to go through and actually activate it for Exchange. And that has to be done through Powershell. This is one of those instances where there is no GUI option for it. You cannot do this through the portal. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up an Azure PowerShell window using PowerShell ISE, just so that we have the script there. I don't have to go out there and type everything out to make my life a little bit easier. So let's dive in here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to run a few scripts, and that's going to require us to be able to run things in a remote sign capability, that is to say, making sure that the scripts are valid. So I'm going to set my execution policy here to remote sign, and we'll just run that in the environment here. This execution policy protects from scripts that we don't trust. We're going to trust these scripts, so we'll say yes to that in our environment. So we're ready to go. Now that I've got that running, I need to start establishing some variables. The first variable I'm going to establish is the actual user credentials that has the privilege to actually manage the Exchange environment and make changes. In this case, it happens to be our good friend Ethan Kane. So I'm going to click on that. We're going to actually run that credential. When I do that, it's actually going to pop up a login box, a credential box, where I'm going to put in Ethan's credentials. So ethan.kane@aeromar.com. And we'll go ahead and add in his password here and provide those credentials. And right now, those credentials haven't even been used for anything. They're just being stored in that variable. The next thing we have to do is we have to actually establish a PowerShell, a remote Exchange PowerShell session with Exchange Online for our subscription. Okay, in order to do that, as you can see here, I have a variable called session. We're establishing a remote PowerShell session with Microsoft Exchange. Right, we'll just show you here. We're actually connecting to this PowerShell Outlook environment. This is considered what we call a PowerShell Web Access environment. Right, we have the ability to do that. And the user credential for my account that it's going to use is the ones that we just stored in that environment. Right, so we're going to go through and run that line just to establish that variable and set up that session. Okay, oops. I put in an extra space by accident. And of course, the red in PowerShell is always our friend, right? As soon as we see it, we know we've got some syntax error somewhere, and we immediately go in and start looking at the syntax and see what's happened. In this case, it was showing me that it did not have something for that connect URI because of the fact that I had an extra space in there. So we'll go ahead and rerun that. And now, so the connection's now being redirected. You can see it's actually giving me a warning here. It's being redirected to this PowerShell, which means anything I issue in the command prompt from this point forward is actually going to be issued on a remote server, in this case, the Exchange environment that is managing my Exchange organization. So we're going to go ahead and import that session, that PowerShell session, into this environment so we can interact with it. And that's going to take a few seconds. You'll see it actually go through and create the module and load in a few pieces here in our environment, get everything set up and ready to rock and roll. So let that finish. Good. You can see we've reconnected it, and we're now ready to actually go out there and start issuing some things. Now that we've established that we've activated Azure Rights Management Services, the next thing we have to do, because Rights Management Services uses certificates for the purposes of encryption and decryption, we have to establish where is that certificate going to be stored. For most of your needs, going out there and actually using Microsoft's keys, probably the easiest thing in the world. And the reason you do that is, number one, Microsoft takes care of key rollover and managing those certificates for you. And quite frankly, number two, if your certificates were to expire, if you were using your own and you weren't updating them, what would happen is access to all of that content protected by those keys would actually be lost until you fix the problem. So using Microsoft is the way to go. So we're going to set our information rights management configuration that our key sharing location in this case is going to be the Microsoft Store. Now what you'll notice is right here in the middle it says .us. Because my tenant account is actually existing in the US, that's where it's going to, the key that it's going to use. That's the storage location. If you happen to be using something, say, over in Europe or over, you can change that to .eu, depending on what your organization's needs are. We'll go ahead and run that to just establish our key sharing location, where those keys are actually going to be stored in our environment. Fantastic. So that we've just to let it know where to get that. The next thing we have to do is in our Exchange org, we have to import what's called the trusted publishing domain, which means we're establishing a relationship between that key sharing location and our Exchange organization. So we're going to go ahead and import that trusted publishing domain here in RMS Online. And let's see here what we got. Okay, when you get something like this, and it's an important thing to actually see, what it's letting me know is that key sharing location is not matching up with my organization. Okay, so there's a possibility that there's a disconnect between what my organization key sharing location is and that. So let's try a different key sharing location. We'll just switch that over to NA and see if that's what we're going to be using now. And all I've done is change that variable a little bit, and we'll try running that import again. And there it is. So you can see this time it worked. Okay, so our tenant location is just a little bit different, and we actually have it all set up there. Now that we've got that imported, we need to go ahead and turn it on in the Exchange environment. We do that just by going and running the set the information rights management configuration to true by turning and enabling that service. We'll just go click that and set that on. And then finally, we have the ability to actually go out there and see if in fact it worked or not. And we can do that by running the test our information rights management configuration. By setting that up and just running that command, we'll be able to see if we in fact pass all of those tests. And as you can see, we get the overall pass here, which means we're in good shape. We've now activated it. Let's go and actually take a look and see what changes we might notice in the portal as a result of that. Let me go ahead and open up my applications and jump over here to my mail. See, we'll open up. And in our environment, let's go ahead and create a new piece of mail. I'll go click the new button here. And I'm going to send this to, we're going to send something to Carlos here in our environment. But the little ellipse, these three little dots that we have over here, right? I'm going to go out there and click on that. And in that ellipse, I'm going to get the opportunity to go in and set some things. Now, what you'll notice here is that I'm actually missing what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for, see where it says set importance right here? Just below that, there should be something that says set permissions. Now that we've activated information rights management, we would have the ability typically to be able to go in and actually prevent forwarding from emails, prevent people from being able to modify the email, but they could forward it, things like that. The reason it's not here is sometimes when you activate information rights management within Exchange, it can take upwards of 24 hours for it to actually process on the back end before those options start actually showing up. So if you don't see them immediately, don't panic, don't be concerned. They will show up eventually and you'll have that opportunity to work with it.